Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Vaylantz Yugioh deck profile for November 2023. We had some new support for the Vaylantz deck come out in the Duelist Nexus pack and the Cyberstorm Access booster set. Never got around to actually updating the deck during those two sets, and now that we have Age of Overlord with some other Pendulum support, I figured I'd finally get around to updating this strategy-like deck that focuses on moving around your Pendulum monsters, whether they be in your Pendulum Scales, to zones on the field, giving your opponent a field spell, while you in turn also have a Vaylantz field spell to then almost make it like a board game scenario where you're using your own monsters against your opponents and setting up them into these same columns to go up against them in a very interesting playstyle. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For the Vaylantz Pendulum monsters, we're running 3 copies of Shinonome, the Vaylantz Priestess. During your main phase, you can special summon this card to your main monster zone in the same column. Also, you cannot special summon non-Vaylantz monsters for the rest of the turn, except from the extra deck. You can only use this effect of Shinonome Priestess once per turn, so you have a special summon from the Pendulum Scale option, just like a good majority of the other cards in the deck. And during your main phase, if you control this special summon card, you can add 1 Vaylantz spell from your deck to your hand. If this card is in the monster zone, moves to another monster zone, you can add 1 Vaylantz monster from your deck to your hand, except for Shinonome. And you can only use each effect of Shinonome once per turn. So you have Spell and Monster Search with this card's main monster effect as well. Depending on the Vaylantz card you may want to add, we run a good number of one-ofs in the deck for these cards as well. So just being able to add the particular one or any of our other Vaylantz monsters, like the 2 Yugioh the Vaylantz Warrior we're running as well. If Vaylantz World Shinra Bancho is in a field zone, or if you control a Water Vaylantz monster, you can special summon this card to your main monster zone in the same column. You can only use this effect of Yugioh the Vaylantz Warrior once per turn. So the setup with your Vaylantz Priestess being a water monster can then give you access to this additional Vaylantz monster on the field. All you have to do is move the column or have the other Pendulum Scale column to then be able to summon Yugioh out onto the field also. We're also running 2 copies of Nezuki, the Vaylantz Ninja. If a Vaylantz Shinra Bancho is in the field zone, or if you control a water Vaylantz monster, you can special summon this card to your main monster zone in the same column. You can only use this effect of the Vaylantz Ninja once per turn, and you can target one other monster in either main monster zone, move that monster to an adjacent horizontal monster zone. And if this card in the monster zone moves to the monster zone, you can target a Vaylantz monster in your spell and trap card zone and special summon it to your main monster zone. I considered running 3 of the Nezuki. If I were to do so, you could drop Yugioh down to 1. It's fine as just being able to be searched out with some of your other cards, with the other of the Spellcaster Vaylantz monsters being 2 copies of our Scion, the Vaylantz Archer. Having the special summon option, during your main phase, you can special summon this card to your main monster zone in the same column. Also, you cannot special summon non-Vaylantz, so having a very similar special summon play like our Shinonome. But also, if you control this special summon card, you can target 1 effect monster on the field, toss a coin. If the result is heads, negates effect, or if the result is tails, half its attack, getting a benefit depending on either coin flip, just varying depending on the card as well. And if this card in the monster zone moves to another monster zone, you can target 1 card on the field, toss a coin. If it's heads, destroy it, or tails, return to the hand. Once again, beneficial just depending on the particular coin flip you get. For the machine Vaylantz monsters that we run, 2 copies of Vaylantz Buster Baron. If you control this special summon card, you can target 1 other Vaylantz monster in your main monster zone, move that monster you control to an adjacent horizontal monster zone. And if this monster zone moves to another monster zone, you can target 1 card in either player's Pendulum zone and place it face up adjacent in the spell and trap card zone as a continuous spell. So more of a take to revert the monsters on the field back to their spell and trap card forms using these monsters as well. But one thing that you'll notice as well is that all the Vaylantz monsters share the same Pendulum Scale. The same with our other ones, which are the Vaylantz Dominator Duke, which we're also running. The additional copies of the 3 copies of the Vaylantz Voltage Viscount, and the 2 copies of the Dominator Duke as well. Having more special summon options in the same column, or if you control Koenig Wyson for the field zone for our Dominator Duke, having the special summon of this card and just needing another Fire Vaylantz monster on the field to do so. And then also having the option to place your Vaylantz monsters face up in the spell and trap card zone as continuous spells as well, giving you more options to move them around on the field also depending on where you place them. since they'll have the additional special summon from your other Vaylantz monsters to adjacent zones. And then for some higher pendulum scales to make use of, I run the 1 copy of Kaiden Kendo Spirit. If a monster is pendulum summoned, return this card from the pendulum zone to the hand. Having this with also the 2 Kurobi Karate Spirit and the 2 Hanshi Kyudo Spirit that we run, just higher scale monsters for us to use with our low scale 1 as well. And since our highest level ones like Vaylantz Dominator Duke are level 8, and so is our Hojo Vaylantz Warrior, using these 5 monsters for their additional pendulum scales means that we can set up a scale of 1 and a scale of 9 and summon out the good majority of the monsters that we run on the field thanks to a pendulum summon. And then for the rest of the monsters, the 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. And I also like to run 2 copies of Lava Golem. This just helps to move around some of the columns that my opponent run also in the deck by tributing their monsters and then just giving them a Lava Golem on the field, getting rid of some pesky monsters. It may take away our normal summon, but we also have just the option to pendulum summon out our Vaylantz monsters on the field, at least giving us more of a monster presence thanks to the pendulum summon. And moving on now to the spells, I run the 1 copy of Vaylantz Wars, the Place of Beginning, and the 1 Senate Switch. With Senate Switch, once per turn, you can target a monster in the main monster zone, choose one of its unused adjacent horizontal monster zones, and move it to that zone, freeing up some of the zones for our other Vaylantz monsters to then be special summoned out from the pendulum scale. And with the Vaylantz War, the Place of the Beginning, you add 1 Vaylantz Field Spell from your deck to your hand, then you can apply the following effect: destroy 1 pendulum monster you control to add 1 Senate Switch from your deck to your hand. So this card can be searched off of Shinonome once again, and also if Senate Switch from your deck to your hand is searched, if this card is sent to the graveyard except the turn was sent there, you can banish it to place 1 Vaylantz Pendulum monster from your extra deck in your pendulum zone. You can use each effect of Vaylantz Wars, the Place of the Beginning, once per turn. So it has to be a face-up one, but you can make use of those ones that got sent there, let's say for any other extra deck plays you may have gotten to go for, including our fusion summons. I also run the 2 copies of Vaylantz World Shinra Bancho and the 1 copy of Vaylantz World Koenig Weissen. The Koenig Weissen just because it's a little more situational for our machine Vaylantz monsters, while Shinra Bancho works more with our spellcaster ones that we may want to summon on the field. When it's activated, you place 1 Vaylantz field spell from your deck face up in your opponent's field zone. So when you activate Shinra Bancho, you'll give your opponent the Koenig Weissen, and then if there are 2 face up field zones, you can, for the turn, the player can target 1 monster in their own spell and trap card zone. They special summon that card to their own main monster zone, giving you back the monsters that you use with the machine Vaylantz monsters to summon back into the field. And with Koenig Weissen, if there are 2 field zones, the turn player can target 1 effective monster in the opponent's main monster zone in the same column as 1 monster they control and place that monster. This is the game I mentioned, being able to use both the field spells depending on if it's your turn or not, to either take 1 of your own monsters and move it forward onto the playing field, or take 1 monster back depending on the field spell that is activated. And then I also run the 3 copies of Vaylantz Awakening solo activation. Place 1 Vaylantz Pendulum monster from your deck in your pendulum zone. If a card is in the field zone, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 Vaylantz monster in your main monster zone and move that monster you control to an adjacent horizontal zone. So having more of a banish option, but also a search option, which doesn't add anything to your hand. It sets it up in the pendulum scale, so a little more difficult to, stop this search based on your opponent's plays. You're just setting up your pendulum scales, all the better. And also the 2 copies of Pendulum Fusion, because we do run a good number of fusion pendulums in the extra deck, including our new Arctos 12 Chronochasm Vaylantz to summon out. Needing the 2 level 5 or higher Vaylantz monsters, we can use Pendulum Fusion, because then it also lets us use monsters in our pendulum scale to fusion summon out those cards. With the rest of the main deck just consisting of the traps, running 1 copy of the new Vaylantz Wave Master Phase. Once per turn, if this card in the monster zone moves to another monster zone during the damage step, you can activate one of these effects. Level 5 or higher Vaylantz monsters you currently control gain 1200 attack to the end of this turn, or you can send this face-up card from the spell and trap card zone to the graveyard to target an effect monster in your opponent's main monster zone and place that opponent's monster face-up as a continuous spell in the same column. So just a way to make use of Master Phase, or as a power boost, or taking out one of your opponent's resources again thanks to this trap. With the last of the traps just being 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence along with the Ash Blossom and the Lava Golems. Just more ways to disrupt some of the columns as well, depending on where they were placed, especially if you activate Impermanence in that column and taking out all the other cards that were in that column to begin with also. Moving on now to the extra deck for our new fusion monster, the Arctos 12 Chronochasm Vaylantz. You can activate one of these effects, special summon this card to your main monster zone in the same column. This is from the Pendulum Scale. Move one monster in your main monster zone to an adjacent horizontal monster zone. You can only use this effect of Chronochasm once per turn, and also it must first be special summon from your face down extra deck by attributing the above cards. You can switch the location of two monsters in your main monster zone or two monsters in your opponent's main monster zone. If a card in the main monster zone moves to another monster zone, except during the damage step, you can destroy one card on the field, being more of the mechanism that determines if something will be destroyed or not if it was moved on the field. Also, the one copy of Mamonaka, the Vaylantz United, and the two copies of the Vaylantz Genesis, Grand Duke. For the additional special summons, just name 3 Vaylantz monsters or 2, depending on which one you want to summon out. And also, these cards are consisted of the higher scales as well. If you didn't have the Yugioh Spirit monsters to summon out, you can at least use these fusions and their higher pendulum scales to summon out some bigger pendulum summons also. For the Link monsters, the one copy of Beyond the Pendulum and the one Exceed the Pendulum from the Age of Overlord booster pack. Just more to work with and our different pendulum monsters. Also the one Zephyra Metaltron and the one Nightmare Phoenix. And some additional Link monsters, including the one SP Little Knight, the one Barricade Board Blocker, one Underclock Taker, one IP Masquerena. And for the higher Link monsters, one Nightmare Unicorn, one Apollosa, and one Axis Kotaker. For more of a generic lineup when we're not going for the fusion monsters. And as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, a lot of this deck just comes down to setup for what you can make use of with your Vaylantz monsters. And with your Shinonome being big on your setup, just having it in the Pendulum Scale to then special summon it out to the monster zone. If you control this special summon card, you can add the Vaylantz spell from your deck to your hand. So then you can add to your hand your Vaylantz Awakening, Soul Activation, placing an additional Pendulum monster from your deck in your spell trap card zone as the setup of the card into the Pendulum Zone. So then you can go for the Vaylantz Archer in the other Pendulum Zone, activating your Vaylantz Archer effect during your main phase to special summon this card from your main monster zone in the same column, giving you that special summon on the field. You then have the coin toss flip option there, or you can go for the additional special summon, setting up the scale with your Hojo Vaylantz Warrior, targeting that monster, Vaylantz World, or the water monster, which Shinonome will be, to special summon this card out onto the field, and then also having this option for that monster, giving you 2 resources on the field to then use for the link summon of your Beyond the Pendulum to give you 1 additional search, which then after you get this additional search, you will just need to make sure you have the additional scale in your hand. So if you search for the lower scale, go for the higher scale for one of your spirit monsters, setting the scale up, and then being able to summon back your 2 Vaylantz monsters to use as those additional resources. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. It's definitely one of the more complicated decks to use and one that you have to practice more with the actual scale setup and basically the mechanism play that the deck is meant to do to really learn how to use all the combos in tandem with all their fusion monsters. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.